The air in the library of the Greywood estate was as cold as the marble fireplace, and just as stiff. The family, the widow Beatrice, the heir, Julian, the daughter, Cassandra, were predators waiting for the kill. And in the corner, in a plain black dress, sat Stella Vance, the charity case, the poor relation, the girl no one ever saw. They were waiting to carve up the billion-dollar empire of Arthur Covington. They figured she was there for a pity stipend of final dismissal. They never should have ignored her. In the next 60 seconds, the girl they treated like furniture would inherit the world and unleash a war. The rain outside the tall, mullioned windows of the Greywood Library was a relentless weeping sheet of grey. It matched the mood of the room perfectly, or at least the mood the room was supposed to have. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old leather lemon oil polish and a cloying, expensive perfume. That perfume belonged to Beatrice Covington Arthur's second wife, a woman sculpted from ice and entitlement. She sat in a high-backed velvet armchair, dabbing at her perfectly dry, kohl-rimmed eyes with a black lace handkerchief. Her mourning was a performance, and she was its star. Opposite her, Julian Covington Arthur's son from his first marriage rhythmically tapped a gold signet ring against the arm of his own chair. He wasn't sad, he was impatient. At 35, he was the heir apparent, the vice president of acquisitions at Covington Global, and he had been waiting for this day his entire adult life. He just wanted the lawyer to arrive, read the words, and hand him the keys. Beside him, his sister Cassandra, Cassie, was scrolling through her phone, her blonde hair a perfect sleek curtain. She was by her own definition a lifestyle influencer, which meant her entire life was a curated gallery of her father's wealth. Her grief was expressed in a series in black and white, artfully teary selfies she had posted that morning, tagged Hackshaw Heartbroken and Orgeon R.I.P. Daddy. And then there was Stella. Stella Vance sat on a small, hard-backed stool near the doorway, as far from the family as possible without leaving the room. She was 24, and for the last 6 years, she had been the estate's resident ghost. She wore a simple black sheath dress she'd owned for years, her brown hair pulled back in a simple knot. She clutched her hands in her lap, her knuckles white. She wasn't family. Not really. She was the daughter of Marcus Vance, Arthur Covington's original business partner and childhood friend. After Marcus died in disgrace, bankrupt and broken, a benevolent Arthur had taken in his orphaned daughter. Stella was his ward, his charity case. The Covingtons never let her forget it. To Beatrice, she was a glorified servant useful for fetching tea or finding Arthur's misplaced reading glasses. To Julian, she was air. He looked through her as if she were a window pane. To Cassandra, she was a prop for occasional feigned kindness, a project. Stella had spent her time at Greywood in the shadows. She learned to be silent, to be helpful, to anticipate needs before they were spoken. But her real life happened in this very library late at night with Arthur. The world saw Arthur Covington as a ruthless titan. Stella knew the man who taught her chess, who sighed over spreadsheets, who quoted Shakespeare, and who in his final 2 years had grown frail and full of a quiet, unnameable sorrow. He had become reliant on her. Not just for company, but for her mind. "You see the patterns, Stella," he'd rasped one night, pointing to a complex stock portfolio. "They just see the money." He'd had her read contracts, draft memos, even analyze acquisition targets. She was his secret analyst, his confidant. The family, of course, saw none of this. They just saw the mousy girl bringing the old man his broth. Stella didn't expect anything. She was here, she assumed, because Arthur's meticulous nature demanded all household residents be present. She expected a small, polite stipend, perhaps enough to get an apartment and a real job, and then she would be dismissed from their lives forever. The thought was both terrifying and a profound relief. The heavy oak doors of the library swung open. Alistair Finch Arthur's longtime attorney entered. He was a tall, gaunt man who looked as though he'd been carved from the same ancient wood as the shelves. He carried a single thick leather briefcase. Beatrice, Julian, Cassandra. He nodded curtly, his eyes scanning the room. His gaze landed on Stella, and for a fraction of a second, his expression softened with something that looked almost like sympathy. He then looked at the Covingtons, and his expression hardened into one of pure, unadulterated duty. Alistair, thank you for coming on such short notice. Beatrice said, her voice a tragic, breathy whisper. Let's just get on with it, Finch. Julian snapped, finally stilling his tapping fingers. We all know what he wanted. I have a company to run. Mr. Finch placed his briefcase on the massive mahogany desk that had been Arthur's. He clicked the brass latches open. The reading of the last will and testament of Arthur Leopold Covington. I will dispense with the usual preamble, as per Arthur's written instructions. He was not a man who enjoyed verbosity. He cleared his throat, pulling out a document bound in a blue legal cover. The room was utterly silent, save for the ticking clock and the drumming rain. First, Finch began, the minor bequests. To the staff of Greywood, a trust of $5 million is established to be shared amongst them, based on years of service, ensuring their pensions and salaries for life. Beatrice nodded, a magnanimous queen pleased with her king's noblesse oblige. Second, to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a donation of $20 million specifically for the new Beatrice Covington wing of modern art. Beatrice preened. This was her legacy secured. Third, Finch continued, his voice monotone, to my wife, Beatrice Covington. I leave the Manhattan penthouse on Fifth Avenue, all its contents, and a lifetime stipend of $200,000 per year to be paid from the estate. The silence that followed was no longer respectful. It was sharp, brittle. What? Beatrice's whisper was a hiss. The penthouse was worth $50 million, but the stipend, it was an allowance, an insult. Alistair, that must be a mistake. The rest of the liquid assets, the properties. The will is quite specific. Beatrice, Finch said, not looking up. The stipend is contingent on your continued discretion and refraining from any public action that might tarnish the Covington name. Arthur was clear. Tarnish, she gasped, clutching her pearls. Fourth bow. Finch read on, ignoring her. To my daughter Cassandra Covington. I leave her personal possessions, her designer wardrobe, and her jewelry, all of which I have paid for. Her current trust fund is hereby frozen its capital to be absorbed by the main estate. She will be given a one-time payment of $500,000 in the hopes she might one day learn to earn a living rather than simply perform one. Cassandra's phone clattered to the floor. He froze my trust. That's not possible. That's my money. And fifth, to my son, Julian Covington. Julian leaned forward, his face pale with rage. This had to be the setup. This is where he got the company. The rest was just Arthur's last, cruel joke. I leave him his current residence in Soho and a one-time final payment of $1 million. The room imploded. $1 million! Julian shot to his feet, his chair crashing backward. That's a bonus, not an inheritance. The company Covington Global, who gets the company Finch, who gets Greywood, who gets everything. He's left it to a foundation, hasn't he? Beatrice cried, her face mottled with rage. That old fool, he gave it all away to save his legacy. No, Finch said, his voice suddenly very clear, cutting through their shrieks. He did not leave it to a foundation. He paused, looking down at the final operative clause. He looked up past the three stunned, furious faces. His eyes found Stella, who was frozen on her stool, believing she had simply been forgotten. "I will read the final clause, verbatim," Finch said, his voice resonating with the full weight of the law. "All the rest residue and remainder of my estate, both real and personal, including, but not limited to my controlling interest in Covington Global, the Greywood estate, and all its lands, my art collection, and all other assets I leave to the one person who has been loyal without price, who has shown intelligence without arrogance, and who understood the work of my life when my own blood saw only its spoils. I leave everything to Ms. Stella Vance." For 3 full seconds, the only sound was the clock. Tick, tock, tick. Stella felt the blood drain from her face, a cold, rushing void. The room tilted, her ears filled with a high-pitched whine. Ms. Stella Vance. It couldn't be. It was a different Stella Vance. It was a mistake. A cruel, terrible joke. Then the teacup and saucer she hadn't realized she was holding, brought in earlier by the housekeeper, slipped from her nerveless fingers. It hit the marble floor with a brittle, definitive crash. The sound broke the spell. "No!" Beatrice's scream was not one of grief. It was a raw, primal sound of pure, unadulterated rage. It was the sound of a queen being dethroned. "That thing!" Cassandra shrieked, her voice cracking into an ugly, shrill register. She pointed a trembling, manicured finger at Stella. That mouse. The charity case. She gets everything." Julian was more terrifying. He didn't scream. He turned his face a mask of purple fury and advanced, not on Stella, but on Alistair Finch. "You bastard!" Julian hissed, jabbing a finger at the lawyer's chest. "This is a forgery. This is a fraud. She manipulated him. A dying, senile old man. She coerced him. You were in on it, weren't you, Finch?" "Get your hands off me, Mr. Covington," Finch said calmly, not flinching as Julian gripped the lapels of his suit. "The will is ironclad." "Ironclad? We'll see. I'll have you disbarred. I'll have her in prison." Julian shoved Finch backward, sending him stumbling into the desk. Papers scattered. "She played you all," Beatrice wailed, rising from her chair, her face a grotesque mask of fury. The quiet little orphan. Oh, she was quiet, all right. Quietly sinking her claws into him. She poisoned him against us. His family. Stella was still on the stool, frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she thought she might break. She was surrounded by broken porcelain and the ruins of a billion-dollar family. I didn't," she whispered, but no one heard her. "I never asked for. I don't understand." "Understand this, you little witch," Cassandra snarled, stalking toward her. "You will not see one penny. We will fight this. We will drag your pathetic little life through every court and every tabloid in New York. We will prove what you are." Cassandra raised her hand to strike, but Finch's voice boomed across the room. "I would not do that, Miss Covington." He had righted himself and retrieved something else from his briefcase. It wasn't a document. It was a tablet computer. "Arthur anticipated this," Finch said, his voice laced with contempt for the three of them. "He knew his family. He knew exactly how you would react." He turned the tablet on. "As executor, I am instructed to present this in the event of any contestation." "What is that? More lies," Julian sneered. "This Artsakh," Finch said, "is a video file. It was recorded 3 weeks ago in this very room. It is accompanied by a full psychiatric evaluation, signed and notarized by Dr. Elias Thorne of Johns Hopkins and Dr. Isabella Rossi of New York Presbyterian, confirming Arthur was of sound mind, lucid and under no duress whatsoever." He pressed play. Arthur Covington's face filled the screen. He looked frail, yes, tucked into a wheelchair with a blanket over his knees. But his eyes were as sharp and clear as a blade. They stared directly into the camera, as if he could see his family raging in front of the screen. Beatrice, Julian, Cassandra. His voice, raspy but strong, filled the library. If you are seeing this, it means you are behaving exactly as I predicted, like a pack of jackals. You have been waiting for me to die for 20 years. You saw me not as a husband or a father, but as a vault to be cracked. You spent your lives spending my money, but you never once spent a moment understanding my work. Or me. Julian, you thought yourself a titan, but you are a hollow man. Your Project Triton deal, which you were so proud of, would have bankrupted the shipping division. You didn't even read the port regulations in Singapore. You just liked the press release. I have spent the last 5 years cleaning up your expensive, arrogant mistakes. You are not fit to lead my company. You are not fit to lead a board meeting. Julian's face went white. He knew exactly what Project Triton was, and he knew no one was supposed to know the details. Cassandra, Arthur continued, his gaze unrelenting, you are a brand. A hollow, shallow brand built on nothing but my name. You have mistaken notoriety for achievement. You have 7 million followers who know what you ate for breakfast, but you do not know who you are. Your trust is cut off because entitlement is a disease, and I will not fund your infection any longer. Cassie let out a strangled sob. And Beatrice? My dear, you married a checkbook. I knew it. You knew it. It was a transaction. You provided a beautiful facade, and I provided a lifestyle. But in the end, you became greedy. You thought your performance of a loving wife entitled you to the entire estate. You were wrong. The stipend is generous. I suggest you learn to live on it. The camera zoomed in slightly on Arthur's face. His expression softened just a fraction. I have left my life's work to the only person who earned it. The only person who sat with me, not out of duty, but out of curiosity. The one who read the contracts, who debated strategy, who saw the work, and not just the reward. Stella Vance has a mind that rivals her father's, and a heart that, thank God, does not resemble mine. This company, this house, this fortune, it is not a gift. It is a burden, and it is a test. Stella, do not let them win. You are not the charity case. You are the only one who ever truly understood. You are a Vance, and you are my true heir. Do not let them win. The screen went black. Alistair Finch stopped the recording. Julian, Beatrice, and Cassandra were silent, their faces a mixture of shock, humiliation, and a deeper, more profound fury. They had been exposed. Gutted. This is not over. Julian finally whispered, his voice trembling with a terrifying cold rage. This is so far from over. On the contrary, Finch said, snapping his briefcase shut. It is over. The will has been filed with the surrogate's court. As of this moment, Stella Vance is the sole owner of the Covington estate and the majority shareholder of Covington Global. Security, whom I took the liberty of hiring, is waiting outside the library doors. They will escort you from the premises. You're kicking us out, Beatrice shrieked. This is my home. It is Miss Vance's home, Finch corrected. You have 24 hours to remove your personal effects from the penthouse. You have 1 hour to vacate Greywood. As if on cue, 2 large men in dark suits opened the library doors. The family stared at them, then at Finch, then at Stella. Stella, who was now standing her hands, shaking so violently she hid them in the folds of her dress. Julian walked slowly, deliberately, until he was right in front of her. He loomed over her. She could smell the expensive, bitter cologne on his suit. Enjoy the big chair, little mouse. He whispered, his voice pure venom. You have no idea the war you've just started. I will tear you down. I will tear the company down around you before I let you have it. He turned and stalked out of the room. Cassandra followed, weeping hysterically. Beatrice, for the first time, looked truly defeated. She gave Stella one last look of pure, unadulterated hatred, and then she too was gone. The great oak doors clicked shut. Stella Vance stood alone in the magnificent silent library, the smell of Beatrice's perfume lingering in the air. She was surrounded by billions of dollars in art, priceless first editions, and the shattering echo of her teacup. She was the richest woman in the state, and she had never felt so terrifyingly, utterly alone. The silence that descended on the library was heavier than any sound. The ticking clock seemed to mock her. Tick, you're in charge. Tock, you're a fraud. Stella sank onto the plush Persian rug, her legs giving way. She stared at the scattered delicate shards of porcelain from the teacup. It was a Minton hand-painted priceless, part of a set Beatrice had imported from London, and she had broken it. It seemed like the only real thing that had happened in the last hour. Miss Vance. Alistair Finch's voice was gentle. He was standing over her, holding out a hand. Are you all right? I think so, she stammered, ignoring his hand and pushing herself up. Mr. Finch, it's a mistake. He couldn't have. The company. I don't know how to run a company. With respect, Miss Vance, that's not true, Finch said, beginning to gather the scattered legal papers. Arthur was very clear on this. For the last 2 years you have been his primary analyst. He told me himself. He said, Finch Julian reads the headlines, Stella reads the footnotes. She's the one who caught the indemnity clause in the Hamburg deal. She saved us 9 figures. Stella blinked. He told you that. He told me everything. He's been planning this for a very long time. He wasn't just testing his family, he was training you. The weight of that settled on her. The late nights she thought were just an old man's loneliness. They were lessons. The contracts he'd had her review. They were exams, the chess games. They were strategy sessions. What do I do now? She asked, her voice small. Now. Finch said, you survive. The Covingtons will not go quietly. Julian is already on the phone with his lawyers. They will file for an injunction. They will claim undue influence, diminished capacity. They will paint you as a monster. But the video, Dr. Thorne, it helps. It's a strong defense. But in the court of public opinion, a grieving family is far more sympathetic than the gold-digging ward. The tabloids will have a field day. And more importantly, there is the company. He handed her a slim, encrypted hard drive. This was from Arthur. He called it the Armory. It contains all his personal notes, his private ledgers, and his assessment of every board member and executive at Covington Global. Their strengths, their weaknesses, their allegiances. You are now the majority shareholder, but the board is full of men loyal to Julian. They will try to oust you before you even sit down. When the emergency board meeting is scheduled for Monday, Julian called it this morning, assuming he would be in charge to consolidate his power. Now, it will be your execution. Or his. Monday. It was Friday. She had 2 days. I need you to go through that drive, Finch said. Every file. Arthur said you'd know what to look for. I meanwhile will handle the estate transfer and the press. My firm's PR department is already drafting a statement. He paused, his expression softening. Stella, he chose you for a reason. Do not doubt him, and do not doubt yourself. Finch left her with a nod, and the doors closed again. Stella spent the next few hours in a daze. She wandered the halls of the great mansion. Greywood, her home. It had never been her home. It had been her gilded cage, and now she owned the bars. The staff who had been informed by Finch's office watched her from the doorways. Their faces were a mixture of shock and open hostility. She was Ms. Vance, now the new mistress, but to them she was just Stella, the girl who ate in the kitchen. She could feel their resentment. She was an usurper. That night she couldn't sleep in her small, plain room in the attic wing. It felt wrong. Steeling her nerves, she walked to the master suite, Arthur's room. It had already been partially sanitized by the staff, but his scent was still there, old books, and the faint, spicy smell of the single malt he enjoyed. She didn't enter. Instead, she went to the adjoining suite, Beatrice's. It was a vision in cream and gold, with a closet the size of Stella's entire apartment. And it was ransacked. Drawers were pulled out. Jewelry boxes were empty. Cassandra and Beatrice had clearly made a frantic dash to grab everything of value before security escorted them out. Stella slept there in the center of the massive silk-sheeted bed and didn't sleep at all. She spent all of Saturday and Sunday in the library, the encrypted drive plugged into her laptop. It was a revelation. Arthur had left her a roadmap to his entire empire. There were dossiers on everyone. Robert Chen, head of Asian markets, pragmatic, hates Julian, loyal to the company, not the family. Can be trusted. Michael Sanford, CFO, a numbers man but weak, will side with whomever he thinks will win, show him strength. And then Julian Covington. The file was thick. It detailed Project Triton, the vanity shipping deal. Finch was right. Stella had warned Arthur about it, but now she saw the whole picture. Julian had bypassed the risk assessment committee. He'd used shell corporations to inflate the purchase price, likely taking a kickback. It wasn't just a bad deal, it was fraud. Arthur's note at the bottom was chilling. This is the poison pill. If Julian ever took over, this would be his first move. He'd destroy the company in a year. He's my son, but he is a fool, and he is corrupt. She found the name of a specific LLC Julian had set up, Triton Logistics LLC, registered in Delaware. She spent 4 hours tracing its ownership, cross-referencing shipping manifests Arthur had saved. By Sunday night, she had it. The money hadn't just gone to a kickback. It had been funneled to an offshore account belonging to Sylvia Harding, a notoriously ruthless corporate lawyer. Julian wasn't just planning a bad deal. He was preemptively funding his legal war against his own family, or perhaps paying for her silence on other matters. Stella finally understood. Arthur hadn't left her a fortune. He'd left her a weapon, a shield, and a direct order to clean his house. The fear didn't vanish. It sharpened. It turned into a cold, hard point of anger. Julian hadn't just been arrogant. He'd been actively stealing from his father. The family hadn't just been cruel. They'd been parasitic. She showered in Beatrice's marble bathroom. She ignored her own simple black dress. She went into that massive closet and found a dark navy blue Armani pantsuit that Beatrice in her haste had left behind. It was a perfect fit. On Monday morning, Stella Vance walked out of Greywood, got into the back of the waiting town car, her town car, and told the driver to take her to the Covington Global Headquarters in Manhattan. She was no longer Stella the Mouse. She was Miss Vance, the majority shareholder. And she was going to war. The Covington Global Boardroom was on the 65th floor, a glass-walled cage overlooking Central Park. It was designed to intimidate, to remind everyone inside that they were at the pinnacle of the world. When Stella walked in at 8:58 a.m., the room fell silent. The entire board was assembled. 12 men and women in dark, expensive suits, their faces grim. They looked like a council of inquisitors, and she was the heretic. At the head of the table in the chairman's seat that had been Arthur's sat Julian. He had clearly expected her to be a no-show, to be too cowed to appear. Her presence was the first blow, and it landed. His face, which had been arranged in a mask of somber, newfound responsibility, tightened into a sneer. "Stella," he said, his voice dripping with false concern, "we're all so glad you could make it. We were worried. This must be so overwhelming for you." "Julian," Stella said, her voice quiet, but carrying in the acoustic-panelled room. She didn't walk to an empty seat on the side. She walked to the other head of the table, the co-chair seat, and placed her laptop on the polished wood. "You're in my chair." The shift in the room was electric. Julian laughed, a short, barking sound. "Always the kidder. Stella, please have a seat. We have serious matters to discuss. The stability of the company first and foremost." "I agree," Stella said. She nodded to the board members. "Good morning. I am Stella Vance. For those of you who don't know me, I was Arthur Covington's personal analyst for the last 28 months. I am also, as of Friday, the majority shareholder of this company." Michael Sanford, the CFO, cleared his throat nervously. "Miss Vance, our deepest condolences, of course. But Julian, Mr. Covington, has called this meeting to propose a temporary leadership structure. Given the unusual circumstances of the will, which I must add we are contesting on behalf of the family." "You are contesting it, Mr. Sanford?" Stella asked, her gaze locking on him. "Or is Julian, are you using company funds to sue the company's owner?" Sanford flushed a deep red. "That's not. We are simply acting to ensure stability." "Good," Stella said, opening her laptop. "Then let's talk about stability. Let's talk about Project Triton." Julian went rigid. Across the table, Robert Chen, the pragmatic one Arthur had trusted, looked up, his expression suddenly sharp and focused. "Project Triton is a legacy-defining expansion into Southeast Asian shipping," Julian said, reverting to his corporate drone voice. "It's a deal my father and I were very excited about." "That's not what his notes say," Stella said. "His notes say, and I quote, 'Julian's folly, a black hole.'" And he was right. She plugged her laptop into the projector. The main screen flickered to life. It wasn't a PowerPoint. It was a flowchart. Project Triton, as you've been told, is an acquisition of 7 Singaporean shipping lanes. Stella began, her voice gaining strength. She was in her element now. This was the work. What Mr. Covington failed to mention in his proposal was the S14 Port Authority compliance clause. A new environmental regulation passed in Singapore 2 months ago. To upgrade the required fleet to meet it would cost this company an estimated $200 million. An expense that isn't in your budget, Mr. Sanford. Sanford looked like he'd been slapped. I wasn't aware of that clause." "Of course you weren't," Stella said. "It was buried in Appendix F. But that's not the real problem. The real problem isn't incompetence, it's fraud." She clicked to the next slide. It showed a series of wire transfers. Julian, Mr. Covington, pushed this deal through his own Special Projects subdivision. He did so by creating a shell intermediary, Triton Logistics LLC, to broker the deal. He claimed this was to fast-track the acquisition. In reality, it was to inflate the price. The sellers in Singapore agreed to a price of $450 million. This board, however, was told the price was $525 million, where, she asked, her voice dropping, did the other $75 million go Julian? Julian was on his feet. "This is libel. This is confidential. You have no right. I have every right. It's my company, and my money." Stella clicked again. A bank statement for an account in the Cayman Islands. "It went here." An account opened by Triton Logistics. An account for which the sole signatory is—" She clicked again. A name. Sylvia Harding. The name hung in the air. Everyone in that room knew who Sylvia Harding was. She was the most feared, most ruthless, and most expensive corporate lawyer in New York. The Piranha. Why? Stella asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Was $75 million of company money funneled to Ms. Harding's private offshore account, Julian? Were you prepaying for her services to contest my father's will, or was it to cover up the fraud you've been committing for the last year? The boardroom was a tomb. The board members were staring at Julian, their expressions a mix of horror and dawning comprehension. They hadn't just been passed over for a mouse, they had been actively betrayed by the heir. "She's lying," Julian roared. She's twisted the data. It's a retainer. For corporate defense. A $75 million retainer. Robert Chen spoke for the first time, his voice a low, powerful rumble. "Mr. Covington, the board has been asking for the Triton files for 6 months. You told us they were proprietary and sensitive. Now I see why." Chen turned his chair, angled it away from Julian, and faced Stella. "Ms. Vance," he said, with a respect that stunned her. "What is your recommendation?" Stella took a deep breath. This was the moment. The pivot. "My recommendation? No, my directive," she said, "is threefold. First, we cancel Project Triton effective immediately. We eat the kill fee. It's better than the alternative. Second, we commission a full independent external audit of Mr. Covington's Special Projects Division, going back 5 years. Mr. Sanford," she said, locking eyes with the terrified CFO, "you will cooperate fully or you will be terminated for cause." Sanford nodded, swallowing. "And third," she said, looking at Julian, who was shaking with rage, "Mr. Julian Covington is hereby removed from his position as Vice President, removed from this board, and suspended from this company effective immediately. Security will escort him out." "You can't," Julian sputtered. "I can," Stella said. "I am the majority shareholder. I am acting to protect the company from an officer who has clearly breached his fiduciary duty. I call for a board vote." "Aye," said Robert Chen, his hand shooting up. "Aye," said another board member. "Aye," said another. One by one, the hands went up. Even Michael Sanford, seeing his own survival on the line, raised a trembling hand. It was unanimous. Julian stared at her, his face a mask of such profound hatred, it was almost inhuman. "You will burn for this, Stella. You hear me? You will burn." The doors to the boardroom opened, and the same 2 security guards who had escorted him from Greywood stepped inside. They flanked him wordlessly. As he was marched out, a defeated, sputtering shell of the man who had walked in. Stella Vance took a sip of water. Her hand, she noted with some surprise, was perfectly steady. She turned back to the stunned board. "Now," she said, clicking off the projector and closing her laptop. "Let's talk about the real state of this company. Mr. Chen, I've read your memos on the Shanghai markets. I have some ideas." She had walked into the lion's den, and the lions had just watched her take down the king of the pride. She wasn't just the heir. She was the boss. Stella won the boardroom battle, but Julian's whispered promise of war had only just begun. The Covingtons couldn't fight her on facts, so they attacked her on perception. The day after the board meeting, the New York Post cover was a full-page, unflattering photo of Stella taken years ago, looking windswept and plain. The headline screamed, "The Covington Cobra. How the charity case seduced and stole a $1 billion empire." The story inside was a masterpiece of fiction, fed to the press by a grieving family friend. It painted Stella as a cunning sociopathic manipulator. It claimed she'd preyed on a grieving senile Arthur, withholding his medication, poisoning his mind against his adored children. Cassandra was quoted extensively weeping about how Stella had stolen her father's last days and banned them from the house. The media storm was instantaneous and brutal. Stella was a late-night talk show punchline. Paparazzi camped outside Greywood and the Covington Global headquarters. Gold Digger, the Serpent, Orphan Annie Warbucks. They were relentless. Inside the company, the staff was divided. The executives who had been at the board meeting were grudgingly respectful, but the rank and file, they read the papers. They whispered in the hallways. Stella was the villain, the usurper. Her authority was paper-thin. Stella felt the walls closing in. She was a prisoner in the 65th floor office, a prisoner in the Greywood mansion. The staff at the house, loyal to Beatrice, became openly hostile. Her meals were served cold. Rooms she requested be cleaned were forgotten. One evening, exhausted and demoralized, she retreated to the library, the only place that still felt like a sanctuary. Alistair Finch was waiting for her. "It's bad, isn't it?" she asked, slumping into Arthur's chair. "It's a manufactured storm, Stella," he said, placing a thick stack of papers on the desk. "And it's working. Sylvia Harding, Julian's lawyer, has filed a motion to contest the will. She is petitioning the court for an emergency injunction to freeze all assets and appoint a neutral third-party conservator, who just so happens to be Julian's former college roommate." "On what grounds?" Stella asked, her stomach twisting. "Undue influence, diminished capacity, elder abuse, all of it. The video message is strong, but Harding is stronger. She's painting you as a master manipulator who staged that video. She's demanding access to Arthur's medical records, to his private correspondence." "She'll find nothing," Stella said. "She won't have to," Finch countered. "She just needs to create doubt. She'll drag this out for years. The board will get restless. The banks will get nervous. She'll bleed you dry in legal fees, stall your every move, and make it impossible for you to run the company. Then when you're at your weakest, she'll force a settlement. Julian gets the company and you get nothing." Stella stared at the chessboard, where a game she and Arthur had been playing was still set up. "Checkmate in 3. He wouldn't have left me in a fight I couldn't win," she whispered. He trained me. He gave me the armory, the data on Julian. It was enough for the board, but it's not enough for this." "Why?" She looked around the library. "Why me, Alistair, really? Why, it couldn't just be because I was good at spreadsheets. He kept saying I was a Vance. He kept talking about my father." Finch sighed. "Arthur and your father, Marcus, were complicated. They built this company together from nothing. Covington Vance Industries, it was called originally. Then there was a bad deal, a major development in the 90s that went sour. The company was on the brink of collapse. Marcus, he took the fall. He resigned, taking full responsibility." "I know that," Stella said. "My father lost everything. He was ruined. He died of a heart attack a year later." "That's the official story," Finch said, his voice low. "But Arthur, he always carried a heavy guilt over it. He felt he'd let his partner down. Taking you in, I think it was his way of atoning." "Atoning?" Stella stood up, a sudden cold dread filling her. "Atoning with what a few million he left me billions. That's not atonement, Alistair. That's something else." She went to the drive, the armory. She had focused on Julian's fraud, but she hadn't looked at the old files, the ones marked CV Industries. What if... she said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. What if I've been looking at the wrong enemy? She opened a folder labeled Private Ledgers, 1995-1997. They were scanned copies of Arthur's personal notebooks. She scrolled through pages of numbers and then she found it. A folder labeled Marcus. Inside was not a ledger. It was a single scanned, handwritten letter. It was dated the day after her father had resigned. It was Arthur's handwriting, but it was addressed to no one. It was a confession. I did it. I saved the company, but I sacrificed the man. Marcus didn't want to leverage the pension funds. He said it was illegal, immoral. I told him it was the only way. I forged his signature on the transfer. When the auditors came, I pointed them to him. He was the one who resigned, the one who took the fall. He came to me, to this library. He said, "Arthur, you've ruined me. You've ruined my name." I told him it was the cost of business. He left. I saved the company. I saved my family. But I destroyed his. Stella felt the air leave her lungs. Her father hadn't taken the fall. He had been pushed. He hadn't just been ruined. He'd been framed by Arthur. He didn't die of a heart attack, did he? She whispered, looking at Finch. Finch's face was grim. He drove his car off the Tappan Zee Bridge. It was ruled an accident. There was no note. Stella sank back into the chair, the letter blurring through her tears. This whole time, she was living in the house of the man who had destroyed her father. This, she stammered, holding up the tablet. This isn't an inheritance. It's not a gift. It's restitution. Stella. No. Her voice was hard. The tears stopped. A cold, diamond-hard fury settled in her heart. He wasn't atoning. He was paying a debt. He owed this to my father. He owed this to me. She looked at the letter again. This was it. This was the why, but it was also a nuclear bomb. This, she said to Finch, proves that the entire Covington fortune was built on a crime, on my father's ruin. Stella, if you release this, Finch warned, you won't just destroy Julian's case, you'll destroy the company. The stock will plummet. The SEC will open an investigation. You'll be left with nothing. It will invalidate the very foundation of the wealth. It's not about the money, Stella said. It's about the truth. She looked back at the drive. There was one more file in the Marcus folder. It was an audio file. For Stella, when you're ready. Her hands shaking, she clicked it. Arthur's voice filled the room. Not the strong will video voice. This was old, weak, and full of pain. Stella, my girl, if you are hearing this, you have found the truth. And you know what a monster I was. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I took your father from you. I built my empire on his grave. And I let my own family, my vile, greedy family, enjoy a life that should have been yours. There was a long, shuddering breath. But there's more, child. You need to know. They knew. Beatrice and Julian. They found my confession letter 10 years ago. They didn't expose me. They used it. Stella's blood ran cold. They have been blackmailing me ever since. Julian's VP title, his unlimited expense account, Beatrice's charity wings, and Penthouse, it was all hush money. They were the ones who insisted you be treated as a servant. They said it was fitting that Marcus Vance's daughter serve the family who really won. They enjoyed the cruelty of it. And I was a coward. I was old and I was trapped by my own sin. This is my only way out. It's not just restitution, Stella. It's the sword. The truth is the sword. Use it. Avenge your father. Avenge yourself. Take back the name they stole from you. Take it all back." The audio ended. Stella and Finch stared at each other in horrified silence. This changed everything. Julian and Beatrice hadn't just been greedy. They were criminals. Blackmail. Extortion. Sylvia Harding. Stella said, her voice a deadly whisper. The $75 million. It wasn't just for the will. It was to pay for her silence. She must have helped them with the blackmail. She's part of it. Stella. Finch said, his legal mind racing. This is no longer a civil case. This is a criminal conspiracy. We have them. We have all of them. Stella stood up. She was no longer the ward. She was no longer the CEO. She was the daughter of Marcus Vance, and she was here for justice. "Get Miss Harding on the phone," Stella said, her voice like ice. "Tell her we need a meeting. Immediately. Tell her we're ready to discuss a settlement." The deposition was set for 10 a.m. at the neutral offices of Alistair Finch's law firm. The conference room was a cage of glass and steel overlooking the financial district. Julian, Beatrice, and Cassandra arrived first, a phalanx of entitlement. Their lawyer, Sylvia Harding, was a small, immaculate woman with a shark's smile. She was here for a quick, brutal kill. Mr. Finch. Ms. Vance. Harding began, her voice a polished monotone as Stella and Finch entered. "I'm glad you've seen reason. My clients are prepared to be generous. They will allow Ms. Vance to keep the Greywood estate in recognition of her past service." "You get the house, Mouse," Julian sneered, leaning back. "We get the company. That's the deal. Take it." "How very generous," Finch said, taking his seat. "Unfortunately, we are not here to discuss a settlement." Harding's smile faltered just a millimeter. "Then why are we here? Your client is about to be buried under litigation she cannot win. We have affidavits from staff, from Mr. Covington's own doctors." "You have nothing," Stella said. Her voice, quiet but cold, cut through the air. She placed a small digital audio recorder on the center of the polished table. "What is this, a stunt?" Cassandra scoffed. "Going to play the will video again? No one cares." "This," Stella said, "is not Arthur's will. This is his confession." She pressed play. Arthur's voice, frail and haunted, filled the room. "Stella, my girl, if you are hearing this, you have found the truth. And you know what a monster I was?" Julian, who had been smirking, froze. Beatrice's hand, halfway to her water glass, stopped mid-air. The recording continued detailing the forgery, the framing of Marcus Vance, and the destruction of Stella's father. "He was delusional," Julian stammered, his face draining of color. "This is the rambling of a sick man. It's inadmissible." "Is it?" Stella asked. "He seems quite lucid." "But you're right. A decades-old crime is messy. It might even destroy the company. No, the real gold is this next part." She let the recording play. "But there's more, child. You need to know." They knew. Beatrice and Julian. They found my confession letter 10 years ago. They have been blackmailing me ever since. Beatrice let out a small, strangled gasp. "Turn it off." Julian shot to his feet, his face purple. "That's a lie. That is a deep fake. That is slander." Sylvia Harding's face was no longer calm. It was a mask of cold, controlled panic. She knew it was true. The audio continued detailing the hush money, the demands, and the specific cruelty of keeping Stella as a servant. When the recording ended, the silence was absolute. "Blackmail," Finch said, sliding a document across the table to Harding. "Extortion, conspiracy to defraud. And that's just for starters. We also have the wire transfers from Project Triton, the $75 million diverted from the company to— Ah, yes. Your account, Miss Harding." Sylvia Harding looked at the document, then at Julian. Her shark's smile was gone. "Julian," she said, her voice like acid, "you told me that money was a corporate defense retainer that Arthur had authorized." He did. This is all a setup." Julian was frantic, looking at his mother. "Mother, tell them it's a lie." Beatrice, however, was staring at the audio recorder. Her entire world, built on reputation, was crumbling. He made us," Beatrice whispered, the dam of her composure finally breaking. Tears, real ones, streamed down her face. Julian found the letter. He said it was leverage, just to protect us. I never knew about the 75 million. "Julian, what did you do?" "Mother, shut up," Julian roared. "You're falling for her trick." "It's no trick, Julian," Stella said. She stood a silhouette of pure, cold power against the bright window. "You didn't just lose the inheritance, you committed federal crimes. You—" She looked at Harding. "And you," she looked at Julian. Sylvia Harding stood snapping her briefcase shut. "This deposition is over." "You're right, it is," Finch said, picking up his phone. "And I'm sure the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District will be very interested in this recording, as will the SEC. Harding paused at the door. "What do you want?" Stella turned. "First, you, Ms. Harding, will immediately dismiss your contestation of the will with prejudice. In exchange, this recording won't be sent to the State Bar. Second, Beatrice and Cassandra, you will sign a full relinquishment of all claims. You will never use the Covington name again. In exchange, I will not include you in the criminal complaint. The stipend is gone. The penthouse is sold. You're on your own." Beatrice just sobbed. And finally, "Julian," Stella said, walking toward him. "You get nothing. You will sign over your shares, and you will still face the consequences of Project Triton. The audit is complete. I'm turning it over to the authorities. You committed wire fraud." Julian looked at his mother, his sister, his lawyer. They had all abandoned him. "You, which?" he spat. "Mr. Finch, draw up the papers," Stella said, walking to the door. "I think we're done here." She left the room, not looking back, leaving them to the ruins of their lives. The fallout was swift and silent. Sylvia Harding, choosing survival, had the will contestation dismissed within the hour. The New York Post, facing a massive libel suit, printed a quiet retraction. The Covingtons vanished, Beatrice and Cassandra stripped of their name, and fortune faded into obscurity. Julian, however, faced the full force of the law. Armed with Stella's meticulous audit of Project Triton, the U.S. Attorney indicted him on multiple counts of wire fraud. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Stella Vance, at 24, was left in sole, undisputed possession of the $12 billion empire. Her first act was one of symbolic justice. She sold Greywood the gilded cage of her past, keeping only the contents of its library. With the proceeds and the capital from liquidating Julian's corrupt Special Projects Division, she established the Marcus Vance Foundation for Ethical Business, a non-profit dedicated to corporate accountability. Her second act was to redefine the future. She called a full board meeting. When she walked in, the intimidating rectangular table was gone, replaced by a large, round one. She took her seat, not as a ruler, but as a leader. "Good morning," she said. The board, including a respectful Robert Chen, looked at her with a new, profound deference. "As of today," Stella announced, "I am proposing a change. We will be filing to restructure our corporate identity. Covington Global was a name built on a crime. It's time to honor the truth." She clicked the projector. A new strong logo appeared on the screen, Vance Covington Global. "We are reclaiming our history," she said, her voice steady. "All of it. Our new corporate charter will include the Marcus Vance Ethics Pledge, We will be a company built on transparency and value, not just price. Robert Chen, who had known her father, was the first to speak, his voice thick with emotion. Marcus, he was the best man I ever knew. He would be so incredibly proud of you, Miss Vance. Stella gave him a small, grateful nod. The company, which had been on the brink of scandal, was now united and stronger than ever, rebranded with a powerful narrative of justice. She was no longer the invisible girl in the plain black dress. She was no longer the charity case, the mouse, or the cobra. She was Stella Vance, the woman who had faced down an empire of lies, and in her father's name, taken back everything. Stella's story isn't just about inheriting wealth. It's about inheriting a fight. It's a powerful, real-life reminder that the people who are overlooked, the ones who sit quietly in the corner, are often the ones with the most strength. They are the ones watching, learning, and waiting. She proved that true power isn't about having a famous name or a loud voice. It's about having the courage to find the truth and the strength to demand justice. The Covingtons saw a mouse, but they forgot that a mouse in a lion's den has to become a lion just to survive. If this story of justice and resilience moved, you please show your support. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of their own strength, and subscribe to our channel for more true stories of the overlooked who rise to take it all. Thank you for listening.